For the charge before this court, you are sentenced to 35 years in the Iowa State Penitentiary.
Man, say whatever you want. I'm done with all of this.
The Christmas morning murder. 16-year-old Snapchat post leads to life sentence. The Snapchat post that shocked America. December 25th, 2021. Christmas morning. No. Across America, children were tearing open presents. Families were making breakfast. The smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls filled kitchens from coast to coast. It was supposed to be the most magical day of the year. But at 7:52 a.m., in a modest ranch house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, something happened that would turn that magic into a nightmare documented in real time on social media. At 7:52 a.m., a Snapchat story appeared on the phones of 237 people. It was posted by Austin Bradley, a 16-year-old high school junior. The image was grainy, taken in low light, but the content was unmistakable. A body lying on a bed, blood visible on the sheets. The scene clearly a bedroom. And the caption, typed in white text with a Christmas tree emoji, read, "I did what needed to be done. Merry Christmas." For the first few seconds, people who saw it thought it was a joke. A screenshot from a horror movie. A tasteless prank. But then, at 7:58 a.m., a second post appeared. This one showed a revolver lying on a nightstand, chamber empty, with the caption, "This is what freedom looks like." And at 8:14 a.m., the third and final post, a selfie of Austin sitting on his front porch, wearing a hoodie and jeans, expressionless, with the caption, "Waiting for the cops. No regrets." By 8:20 a.m., 3 separate people had called 911. By 8:43 a.m., Cedar Rapids police had arrived at 2847 Oak Street. They found Austin exactly where he'd said he'd be, sitting on the front porch, smoking a cigarette, calm as a winter morning. And inside the house, in the master bedroom, they found Mark Dawson, age 42, dead from 3 gunshot wounds. 1 to the chest, 1 to the abdomen, 1 to the head. Austin's stepfather, shot while he slept. On Christmas morning. The Vindication logs the Christmas Day confession. My name is Austin Bradley. On Christmas morning 2021, I shot my stepfather, Mark Dawson, 3 times. Then I posted about it on Snapchat. Then I waited for the police to arrest me. I was 16 years old. The media called me a monster. The prosecution called me a cold-blooded killer. My own mother testified against me in court. But what they didn't show you, what they didn't want you to see, was the 3 years of hell that led to that moment. This is the story of how I became the most hated teenager in Iowa, how my social media posts became evidence against me, and how I ended up with a 35-year sentence for killing the man who made my life a living nightmare. This is the Christmas Day confession. The House of Broken Glass. The Bradley Dawson household. Deutsche Way. To understand what happened on Christmas morning 2021, you have to understand the household I grew up in. And to understand that household, you have to understand my mother, Jennifer Bradley, and the man she married when I was 13 years old, Mark Dawson. This is not a story about a perfect family destroyed by one violent act. This is a story about a broken family that was heading toward violence from the day Mark moved into our house. I was born Austin James Bradley on March 14, 2005, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My father, my biological father, was named James Bradley. He left when I was 4 years old. I have 3 memories of him, one of him teaching me to ride a bike, one of him arguing with my mom in the kitchen, and one of him walking out the front door with 2 suitcases and never coming back. My mom told me he was not ready to be a father. Years later, I found out he'd been arrested for drug possession and served 2 years in prison. He never tried to contact us again. He died in a car accident in 2019. I didn't go to the funeral. My mom, Jennifer, worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She was a receptionist at a dental office during the day and a waitress at a diner 3 nights a week. She was exhausted all the time, stressed about money, and desperate for stability. I understood that, even as a kid. I tried to help. I took care of my younger siblings, Dylan, born 2008, and Emma, born 2010. I made sure they got to school, made them dinner when Mom worked late, helped with homework. I was the man of the house by the time I was 10 years old, and I wore that responsibility like a weight around my neck. In the summer of 2018, when I was 13, my mom met Mark Dawson at the diner where she worked. Mark was a construction foreman, 40 years old, divorced, no kids. He was a big guy, 6'2", 220 pounds, thick arms from years of manual labor. He had a deep voice, a loud laugh, and a way of commanding a room that my mom found attractive. She'd been alone for 9 years. She was tired of struggling. Mark represented security, a steady paycheck, a man who could take care of things, someone who could be the father figure we'd never had. They dated for 4 months. Then he moved in. Then, in December 2018, they got married at the courthouse. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't asked how I felt. I came home from school one day, and Mark's truck was in the driveway, his tools in the garage, his clothes in my mom's closet. He was my stepfather, and my life was never the same. Mark was charming at first. He took us to baseball games. He helped me with my homework. He fixed things around the house that had been broken for years. He bought Dylan a new bike. He brought home pizza on Fridays. For about 6 months, I thought maybe this would be good for us. Maybe we'd finally have a normal family. But then the mask started to slip. Mark drank Dot. Not socially, not casually. He drank every single night. He'd come home from work around 6 p.m., crack open a beer, and drink steadily until he went to bed around 11. On weekends, he'd start at noon. He was a functional alcoholic, meaning he held down his job, he paid the bills, but after 8 p.m., he was a different person. He got mean. He got loud. He got violent. The first time he hit me, I was 14. It was February 2019. I'd gotten a C on a math test, and when he saw the grade, he went off. He said I was lazy, that I was wasting my potential, that I was an embarrassment. I tried to defend myself, told him I'd studied, but the test was hard. He told me to stop making excuses. Then he slapped me across the face hard enough that my ears rang. I stood there, stunned. My mom was in the kitchen. She saw it happen. She didn't say anything. She just turned around and went back to washing dishes. That was the first time, but it wasn't the last. Over the next 2 years, Mark hit me dozens of times. Slaps, shoves, punches to the ribs, once a kick to the back when I was on the ground after he'd knocked me down for talking back. He broke my wrist in October 2019. He'd grabbed my arm and twisted it during an argument about me staying out past curfew. He said it was an accident, that I'd pulled away wrong. The ER doctor gave me a cast and asked if I wanted to talk to a social worker. I said no. I was too scared of what would happen if I told the truth. But it wasn't just the physical violence. It was the psychological abuse, the constant degradation, the insults, the control. Mark treated me like I was his property. He went through my phone every night, reading my texts, checking my social media, demanding to know who I was talking to and what I was saying. He made me delete contacts he didn't approve of. He set parental controls on my laptop so I couldn't access certain websites. He told me I wasn't allowed to have friends over without his permission. He said I was too stupid to make my own decisions, that I needed to be managed, or I'd end up a loser like my real father. He didn't hit Dylan or Emma. They were too young, and maybe some part of him knew that hitting little kids would cross a line even my mom couldn't ignore. But he yelled at them constantly. He made Emma cry almost every night with his screaming. He told Dylan he was soft and need to tune up. He created an atmosphere of fear in that house, where we all walked on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. And my mom, she did nothing. She defended him. She made excuses. He's under a lot of stress at work. He doesn't mean it. You need to stop provoking him. She chose him over me, over Dylan, over Emma. She chose the security of his paycheck and his presence over the safety of her own children. I think part of her was so terrified of being alone again that she was willing to tolerate anything. And part of her, I realized later, genuinely didn't see what was happening as abuse. She saw it as discipline. She saw Mark as a man keeping me in line. She was complicit in my suffering, and that betrayal cut deeper than any of Mark's punches ever could. I tried to get help. In the spring of 2020, I told my school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, that things were rough at home. I didn't give her specifics. I was too ashamed, too scared. But I said enough that she was concerned. She called my mom. My mom told her everything was fine, that I was going through a rebellious phase, that I was exaggerating for attention. Mrs. Patterson believed her. Case closed. No follow-up, no intervention. I learned that day that no one was coming to save me. If I wanted to survive, I had to do it myself. By the summer of 2021, I was planning my escape. I'd turn 18 in March 2023. I could leave. I could join the military, go to college, get a job in another city, anything to get away from Mark. I just had to survive 2 more years. I kept a countdown in my head. 730 days. I could make it. I had to make it. But then, in November 2021, something changed. Mark lost his job. The construction company he worked for went under. And suddenly Mark was home all day, drinking all day, angrier than ever. Money got tight. My mom picked up extra shifts. And Mark's rage, which had always been bad, became unbearable. He started blaming me for everything, for the bills, for his unemployment, for the fact that his life hadn't turned out the way he wanted. He told me I was sucking the family dry, that I was a burden, that he wished my mom had never had me. He started making threats, that he'd kick me out when I turned 18, that he'd make sure I ended up on the streets, that I'd never amount to anything. By December 2021, I wasn't planning to survive 2 more years. I was planning something else entirely. The breaking point. December 2021 was the worst month of my life. Mark had been unemployed for 6 weeks. He wasn't even looking for work anymore. He'd sit in his recliner all day, drinking beer, watching TV, and seething with resentment. My mom was working 60 hours a week to pay the bills, and when she came home, exhausted and stressed, Mark would yell at her for not making dinner, for not cleaning the house, for not taking care of him the way a wife should. I watched my mom shrink into herself, becoming smaller and quieter, apologizing constantly for things that weren't her fault. I hated Mark for what he was doing to her, even as I hated her for not standing up to him, for not protecting us. The financial pressure was crushing. Bills were piling up. The mortgage payment was late. The electricity had been shut off once already, and only restored when my mom borrowed money from her sister. We were eating ramen noodles and canned soup for dinner most nights because that's all we could afford. Mark would complain constantly, "This food is garbage. I can't live like this. I deserve better than this," but he wasn't contributing a single dollar. He'd blown through his severance pay in the first 3 weeks, spending it on beer, cigarettes, and lottery tickets. He had a gambling problem my mom wouldn't admit existed. Every Friday, he'd take whatever cash we had and go to the convenience store to buy scratch-offs, convinced he was going to hit it big. He never did. He'd come home drunk and angry, having lost another $50 we couldn't afford to lose. The house itself was falling apart. The furnace broke in early December, and we couldn't afford to fix it. We heated the house with space heaters and wore layers of clothing to bed. The roof was leaking in 2 places. We had buckets in the hallway, and the bathroom catching drips. The washing machine had been broken for a month, so my mom was washing our clothes in the bathtub. Mark would complain about all of it, but wouldn't lift a finger to help. "I'm not a handyman," he'd say. "That's not my job." But it had been his job when he'd wanted to impress my mom, back when they were dating. Now that he had her locked in, married, dependent on him, he didn't have to pretend anymore. Dylan and Emma were suffering too. Dylan's grades had dropped. He was getting C's and D's because he couldn't concentrate in school. He was having nightmares, wetting the bed again at 13 years old, something he hadn't done since he was 6. Emma had stopped talking almost entirely. She'd gone from a chatty, bubbly 10-year-old to a silent ghost who'd flinch every time an adult raised their voice. I tried to protect them as much as I could. I'd keep them in their rooms when Mark was drinking. I'd make them dinner when my mom worked late. I'd help Dylan with his homework and read Emma bedtime stories. I was trying to be the parent my mom couldn't be, the protector they needed. But I was just a kid myself. I was 16 years old, and I was drowning. On December 10th, 2021, something happened that changed everything. It was a Friday evening. Mark had been drinking since noon. He was in one of his moods. Loud, aggressive, looking for a fight. He'd been watching TV, flipping through channels, getting angrier by the minute because there was nothing good on. My mom was at work. Dylan, Emma, and I were trying to stay out of his way, but that wasn't good enough. Mark started yelling at Dylan for leaving his backpack in the living room. How many times do I have to tell you to put your shit away? You think I want to look at your crap all day? Dylan was 13 years old, terrified, on the verge of tears. He picked up the backpack and started to leave. Mark wasn't done. And another thing, your grades are garbage. You got a D on your math test. A D? What the hell is wrong with you? Are you stupid? Dylan's face crumpled. He was trying so hard not to cry, but tears were streaming down his face. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up from where I'd been sitting on the couch. Mark, leave him alone, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He's a kid. He forgot to move his backpack. It's not a big deal. Mark turned on me slowly, his eyes narrowing. Oh, so now you're the man of the house. You think you can tell me what to do? I felt my heart start to pound, but I stood my ground. I'm just saying, leave him alone. He didn't do anything wrong. You're drunk, and you're taking it out on a 13-year-old. That's not okay. Mark stood up from his chair. He was 6'2", 220 pounds. I was 5'10", 150 pounds. He towered over me. You think you're tough now? You think because you're 16 you can talk back to me? He got in my face so close I could smell the beer on his breath. Let me tell you something, you little shit. Your dad left because of you. He looked at you and realized he'd made a mistake. And now you're here, ruining my life too. You're a burden. You're worthless. And if your mother had any sense, she'd have given you up for adoption years ago. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the comment about my dad. Maybe it was the months of built-up rage. Maybe it was just exhaustion. I shoved him. Not hard, just enough to get him out of my face. Shut up, I said. Just shut up. It was the first time I'd ever physically pushed back against him. And it was the biggest mistake I could have made. Mark's face went red. For a second, he just stared at me, like he couldn't believe I'd dared to touch him. Then he grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against the wall so hard the pictures rattled. He held me there, squeezing, cutting off my air. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at his hands, trying to pry them off, but he was too strong. My vision started to go dark around the edges. I could hear Dylan screaming, "Stop! You're killing him!" I could hear Emma sobbing. And then, just as I thought I was going to pass out, Mark let go. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, my throat burning. Mark stood over me, breathing hard. "Next time, I'll fucking kill you," he said. Then he walked back to his chair, picked up his beer, and turned on the TV like nothing had happened. Dylan helped me up. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely stand. I stumbled to my room, closed the door, and locked it. I sat on my bed, my hand on my throat, feeling the bruises already starting to form. And I realized something. Mark was going to kill me eventually. Not that day, maybe not that week, but one day he'd lose control completely. and I'd end up dead. Or maybe Dylan would. Or Emma. Someone was going to die in that house, and it would be Mark's fault. Unless I did something first. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying what had happened. I kept thinking about the look in Mark's eyes when he was choking me. Not anger, exactly, but satisfaction. He'd enjoyed it. He'd enjoyed having that much power over me, enjoyed watching me struggle. And I realized that no amount of compliance, no amount of trying to stay out of his way, would ever be enough. He didn't want me to behave. He wanted me to suffer. He needed someone to dominate, someone to hurt, and I was the most convenient target. The next morning, December 11th, I woke up early and went to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. There were dark purple bruises around my throat in the shape of Mark's fingers. I pulled my hoodie up to cover them, but they were still visible. I knew I should go to school, show a teacher, report what had happened. But I also knew what would happen if I did. They'd call Child Protective Services. CPS would investigate. My mom would lie and say nothing happened. Mark would lie. Dylan and Emma would be too scared to tell the truth, and the investigation would go nowhere. Worse, Mark would know I'd tried to get him in trouble, and the retaliation would be brutal. So I did nothing. I pulled my hoodie tighter and went to school like everything was normal. At lunch, my girlfriend Samantha saw the bruises. "Austin, what happened to your neck?" I tried to play it off. "Nothing. Just messing around with some friends." She didn't believe me. She pulled me aside into an empty hallway and made me show her. When she saw the full extent of the bruising, her eyes went wide. "Austin, someone choked you." "Who did this?" I wanted to tell her. I wanted to tell someone. But I was so tired of talking about it, so tired of not being believed, so tired of feeling helpless. "It doesn't matter," I said. "It's fine." "I'm fine." Samantha grabbed my arm. "It's not fine. You need to tell someone. A teacher? The police? Anyone." I pulled away. "It won't help. No one ever helps. Just drop it, okay?" But Samantha wouldn't drop it. That night, she texted me, "I'm worried about you. You can't keep living like this. Promise me you'll be safe." I texted back, "I can't promise that, but I'll try." She replied, "What does that mean?" "Austin, you're scaring me." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that you're not sure you're going to survive the next few months? How do you tell someone that the person who's supposed to protect you is the one you're most afraid of? Over the next week, I started researching. Not just self-defense laws, but how to survive domestic violence. What to do when no one believes you. Teen shelters near me. I found out there was a youth crisis hotline I could call. I found out there were shelters for kids escaping abusive homes. I even looked into emancipation, the legal process of becoming independent from your parents before you turn 18. But every option had obstacles. The crisis hotline required parental permission for anyone under 18. The shelters were full or only accepted kids who'd been removed by CPS. Emancipation required proof I could support myself financially, which I couldn't. Every door was closed. Every path was blocked. I was trapped. On December 15th, I made the search that would later be used against me in court. I Googled how to make someone's death look like an accident. I don't remember exactly why I searched for that. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I was exploring all my options. Maybe some part of me was already planning what would happen 10 days later. I read articles about staged car accidents, house fires, poisoning. I read about how police investigate suspicious deaths, how they look for evidence of foul play. I read about how hard it is to actually get away with murder. And then I closed the laptop and went to bed, my mind spinning. On December 18th, I found the gun. I'd known it was in the garage. My mom had mentioned it once, years ago, saying it had belonged to her father, and she'd kept it just in case. I'd never thought about it much until now. But that night, when everyone was asleep, I went out to the garage. The safe was gray metal, about the size of a shoebox, with a combination lock. I'd watched my mom open it once, maybe a year ago, when she was looking for some old documents. The combination was her birthday, 4/17/73. I tried it. The safe clicked open. Inside was the revolver, a .38 Special 5-shot cylinder, matte black finish. It was loaded. There were also 2 boxes of ammunition, though I didn't need them. 5 bullets were already in the gun. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, cold and solid. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it, and I thought about what it would be like to use it. To point it at Mark.ear. To pull the trigger. To end the nightmare once and for all. I stood there in the dark garage for maybe 10 minutes, just holding the gun, imagining. Then I put it back in the safe, closed it, and went back inside. But I knew where it was now. I knew I could get it whenever I needed to. The next few days were a blur. Mark's mood kept getting worse. He was drinking more, sleeping less, yelling more. On December 20th, he threw a plate at the wall because he didn't like what my mom had cooked for dinner. The plate shattered, leaving a dent in the drywall and ceramic shards all over the floor. My mom cleaned it up without saying a word, apologizing for making bad food. I watched her on her hands and knees picking up broken pieces of plate, and I felt something inside me break too. This was never going to get better. Mark was never going to change. We were never going to be safe as long as he was alive. On December 22nd, I texted Samantha. I can't take this anymore. One day I'm just gonna snap. She texted back immediately. Don't say stuff like that. You're scaring me. Are you okay? Do you need help? I replied, I'm not gonna do anything. I just needed to vent. But I was lying. I was already thinking about it. I was already planning it. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. December 23rd was the day I made the final decision. It was the day before Christmas Eve, and my mom had insisted we all go to church, a family tradition she clung to desperately, as if sitting in a pew and singing hymns could somehow make us normal. We drove to the church in silence. Mark sat in the front seat, already smelling like beer even though it was only 5 p.m. My mom drove, her hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, her jaw clenched. Dylan and Emma sat on either side of me in the back seat, both of them staring out the windows, both of them silent. We looked like a family from the outside, but we were broken. We were so broken that no amount of prayer could fix us. The church service was generic, Christmas carols, a sermon about hope and redemption, prayers for peace on earth. I didn't hear any of it. I sat in the pew, staring at the stained glass windows, thinking about the gun in the garage, thinking about how easy it would be, thinking about how much better life would be without Mark. I looked over at my mom, sitting next to Mark, holding his hand like he was a normal husband and not a monster. I looked at Dylan and Emma, both of them with dark circles under their eyes from not sleeping, both of them too scared to be kids anymore. And I thought, I have to end this. I have to save them. After church, we went home and opened one present each. Dylan got a video game he'd asked for. Emma got a stuffed animal. My mom got a necklace from Mark. Cheap, probably from a gas station, but she acted like it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Mark got a bottle of whiskey from my mom, which he opened immediately and started drinking straight from the bottle. I didn't get anything. You're too old for presents, Mark said, taking another swig of whiskey. Time to grow up. My mom gave me an apologetic look, but didn't say anything. I went to my room and stayed there for the rest of the night. Around 10 p.m. I heard them arguing in their bedroom. Mark's voice was loud, slurred. I'm so sick of this shit, Jennifer. I'm sick of working my ass off. You're not working, Mark, my mom interrupted quietly. You haven't worked in 2 months. Don't interrupt me. I'm sick of working my ass off for this family and getting no respect. That kid of yours is a punk. He needs to be taught a lesson. My mom's voice was quiet, pleading. He's a good kid, Mark. He's just going through a hard time. Bullshit. He's a spoiled brat. If he were my son, I'd have beaten that attitude out of him years ago. Actually, you know what? Maybe I will. Maybe it's time someone taught him what respect looks like. I lay in bed, listening to him talk about beating me, and I realized I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't survive another week, another day. If I didn't do something, Mark was going to kill me. Or he'd hurt Dylan or Emma. It was only a matter of time. I pulled out my phone and texted Samantha one last time at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. Watch the news, lol. She replied immediately. What does that mean? Austin, you're freaking me out. Please talk to me. I turned off my phone without responding. I set my alarm for 6:30 a.m. And I went to sleep, knowing exactly what I was going to do when I woke up. Christmas morning, the 3 shots. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. on Christmas morning, December 25th, 2021. The house was completely silent. Dylan and Emma were still asleep. They wouldn't wake up for at least another hour, excited to open presents under the tree. My mom was asleep, and Mark was asleep in the master bedroom at the end of the hall, probably still drunk from the bottle of whiskey he'd finished the night before. I lay in bed for 10 minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own heartbeat, thinking about what I was about to do. I could still back out. I could just get up, go downstairs, make breakfast, pretend everything was normal. I could survive one more day, and then another, and then another, until I turned 18 and could leave. I could do that. People survived worse. But I didn't want to survive anymore. I wanted it to be over. I thought about all the times I'd imagined this moment. All the nights I'd lain awake, fantasizing about Mark just disappearing, getting hit by a car, having a heart attack, choking on his food. Any random accident that would take him out of our lives without requiring me to do anything. But those were just fantasies. The reality was that Mark wasn't going anywhere. He was going to keep drinking, keep yelling, keep hitting, keep making our lives hell until one of us broke completely. And I'd decided I'd rather be the one who breaks him first. At 6:45 a.m., I got out of bed. I moved slowly, carefully, trying not to make any noise. I got dressed, jeans, a hoodie, socks, but no shoes. I didn't want my footsteps to wake anyone. I looked at myself in the mirror above my dresser. I looked tired. I looked older than 16. I looked like someone who'd already made peace with what he was about to do. I took a deep breath and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was dark. I walked past Dylan's room. His door was closed, and I could hear him snoring softly. I walked past Emma's room. Her door was cracked open, and I could see her sleeping with her stuffed animals. I paused for a second, looking at her, and I thought, this is for you. This is to protect you. You'll understand someday. Then I walked down the stairs, each step creaking slightly, and I held my breath, waiting to see if anyone woke up. No one did. I went to the garage. It was freezing out there. The temperature had dropped to the low 20s overnight, and our garage wasn't insulated. My breath came out in white puffs. I went to the shelf where the safe was kept, hidden behind some old paint cans. I pulled it out, set it on the workbench, and entered the combination. 417 73. The lock clicked. I opened the safe and took out the revolver. I checked the cylinder. 5 rounds loaded. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. I held the gun, feeling the weight of it. And I thought about my grandfather. He'd been a veteran, served in Vietnam, came home with PTSD and a drinking problem, but never hurt anyone. He'd kept this gun for protection, for emergencies. Would he think this was an emergency? Would he understand what I was about to do? Or would he be ashamed of me? I didn't know, and I realized it didn't matter. My grandfather was dead. Mark was alive. And one of those facts needed to change. I walked back into the house. It was 7:05 now. The sun was starting to come up, pale winter light filtering through the living room windows. Everything was so quiet, so normal. It was Christmas morning. In a few hours, families all over the country would be opening presents, making pancakes, watching kids play with new toys. We were supposed to be doing that too. But we weren't a normal family. We hadn't been for years. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up. The master bedroom was at the end of the upstairs hallway. All I had to do was walk up those stairs, open the door, and end this. It would take 60 seconds. Maybe less. And then it would be over. Mark would be gone. We'd be free. But I'd also be a murderer. I'd go to prison. I'd lose everything. Was it worth it? I thought about Dylan's face when Mark yelled at him. I thought about Emma crying herself to sleep. I thought about my mom apologizing for existing. I thought about the bruises on my throat from where Mark had choked me. And I thought, yes, it's worth it. I walked upstairs. Each step felt like it took an eternity. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would wake everyone up. I reached the top of the stairs. I turned left. I walked down the hallway. I stood outside the master bedroom door. I could hear Mark snoring inside, deep, rattling snores that meant he was passed out cold. I put my hand on the doorknob. It was unlocked. I turned it slowly, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room smelled like sweat and alcohol. The curtains were closed, so it was dark except for a thin line of light coming through the gap. I could see Mark's shape on the bed, lying on his back, one arm thrown over his head, mouth open, completely unconscious. He looked peaceful, vulnerable, human. For a second, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if Mark could change? What if things could get better? What if then I remembered the look in his eyes when he choked me, the satisfaction, the enjoyment, and I raised the gun. I aimed at his chest. My hands were shaking so badly I didn't know if I'd hit him. I took a deep breath, and I pulled the trigger. The noise was deafening, a sharp, explosive crack that echoed in the small room, so loud I thought my eardrums would burst. The recoil jerked my arms back. I'd never fired a gun before. I didn't know it would be that loud, that violent. Mark's eyes flew open. He tried to sit up. He looked at me, and for a split second, our eyes met. He saw me. He saw the gun. He opened his mouth to say something. Austin. I fired again. The second shot hit him in the abdomen. He gasped, a wet, choking sound, and grabbed his stomach. Blood was already spreading across his white t-shirt, dark and fast. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a gurgling noise. He was staring at me with this look of confusion and pain. And maybe, just maybe, fear. Good. Let him be scared. Let him feel what we felt every day. I fired the third shot. I aimed for his head, but my hands were shaking, and I hit him in the side of the neck instead. Blood sprayed across the pillow, the headboard, the wall. Mark's body jerked once, then went still. His eyes were still open, staring at nothing. The room smelled like gunpowder and blood and something else. Something I couldn't identify, but would never forget. I stood there, the gun still in my hand, and I realized what I'd done. I'd killed him. I'd actually done it. Mark Dawson was dead, and I had killed him. I felt nothing. No regret, no horror, no relief. Just a vast, empty numbness. I think my brain was protecting me, giving me a few minutes of blankness before the reality hit. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Running. My mom's voice. Austin? What was that noise? Was that, oh my God? Oh my God. She appeared in the doorway. She was wearing her bathrobe, her hair messy, her face pale. She looked at me. She looked at the gun in my hand. She looked at Mark's body on the bed, blood everywhere. And she screamed, a high, piercing scream that seemed to go on forever. What did you do? What did you do? Oh God, what did you do? I wanted to tell her I was sorry. I wanted to tell her I had to do it, that he was going to kill me, that I had no choice. But the words wouldn't come. I just stood there, staring at her, the gun heavy in my hand. She collapsed to her knees in the doorway, her hands over her face, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. You killed my husband. You killed him. Why? Why? I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I had too many answers. Because he hurt me. Because he hurt you. Because he hurt Dylan and Emma. Because he was never going to stop. Because I couldn't take it anymore. Because I wanted us to be free. But all those reasons seemed inadequate now, standing in a bedroom that smelled like death, looking at my mother falling apart on the floor. I stepped past her and walked downstairs. I could hear Dylan's door opening, could hear Emma crying, could hear my mom still screaming, but I didn't stop. I walked through the living room, through the front door, and sat down on the porch steps. It was cold, maybe 25 degrees. I could see my breath. I could see the neighbors' Christmas lights still on. I could see the sun coming up over the rooftops. It was 7:47 a.m. Christmas morning got taught, and I just killed a man. I pulled out my phone. And then I did something that would define the rest of my life. Something I still can't fully explain. I took a photo of Mark's body through the open bedroom door. I posted it to my Snapchat story. The caption: I did what needed to be done. Merry Christmas, twatter dat to be. Then I took a photo of the gun, which I'd set down on the porch next to me. Caption: or. This is what freedom looks like. Then, a selfie. Me, sitting on the porch, expressionless. Caption: waiting for the cops. No regrets. No regrets. Why? Everyone asks me that. The prosecutor asked. The media asked. My lawyer asked. Even I've asked myself 1,000 times. Why did you post those photos? And the honest answer is, I don't know. Maybe I wanted the world to know what I'd done. Maybe I wanted to own it, to not hide, to not be ashamed. Maybe I was in shock and not thinking clearly. Or maybe, deep down, I wanted to get caught. I wanted it to be over, the abuse, the fear, the lying, all of it. And posting those photos was the fastest way to make sure that happened. Within minutes, my phone started blowing up. Messages. WTF is this? Is this real? Austin, are you okay? People were screenshotting the posts. People were calling 911. By 8:20 a.m., police were on their way. AT 8:43 a.m. 2 patrol cars pulled up, sirens blaring, lights flashing. 4 officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting, "Put your hands up! Get on the ground!" I stood up slowly, raised my hands, and said calmly, "The gun's on the porch. I'm not armed. He's inside. He's dead. They cuffed me, read me my rights, put me in the back of the car." And as I sat there, watching more cops arrive, watching them tape off the house, watching my neighbors come out to stare, I realized my life is over. Everything I was, everything I could have been, gone. I killed Mark Dawson on Christmas morning, and now I'm going to pay for it for the rest of my life. The confession and the investigation. The interrogation, ball. The interrogation room at the Cedar Rapids Police Department was exactly what you'd expect. A small, windowless box with cinder block walls painted beige, a metal table bolted to the floor, 3 chairs, a camera mounted in the corner, and fluorescent lights that hummed constantly. I sat in one of the chairs, still wearing the jeans and hoodie I'd put on that morning, my hands cuffed in front of me. I'd been sitting there for over 2 hours, alone, waiting. I didn't know what they were doing, processing the scene, talking to my mom, securing evidence, but I knew I was in trouble. Deep trouble. The kind of trouble you don't come back from. At 11:30 a.m., the door opened, and Detective Sarah Ortiz walked in. She was in her 40s, Hispanic, with short dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a navy pantsuit. She carried a folder and a recorder. She sat down across from me, set the recorder on the table, and pressed record. Then she read me my Miranda rights for the second time. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights? I nodded. I need you to say yes or no, she said. Yes, I said. I understand. Knowing and understanding your rights, are you willing to talk to me? I should have said no. I should have asked for a lawyer. But I was 16 years old, exhausted, still in shock, and some part of me wanted to tell someone what had happened. I wanted someone to understand. So I said, yes, I'll talk. Detective Ortiz opened her folder and pulled out a photo. It was a screenshot of my Snapchat post, the one showing Mark's body. She slid it across the table. Austin, is this your Snapchat account? Yes. Did you post this photo this morning? Yes. Yes. What is this a photo of? I looked at the image. I'd seen it 100 times already. I'd posted it after all. But seeing it printed out, in color, in a police interrogation room, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. That's Mark, I said quietly. My stepfather. I killed him. Detective Ortiz didn't react. She just made a note in her file. Okay. Can you tell me what happened this morning? Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her everything. I told her about Mark moving in when I was 13. I told her about the drinking, the yelling, the hitting. I told her about the time he broke my wrist, the time he choked me, the constant insults and threats. I told her how scared I was all the time, how I couldn't sleep, how I'd started having panic attacks. I told her about finding the gun in the garage. I told her about waking up on Christmas morning and making the decision. I told her about walking into Mark's bedroom, raising the gun, and firing 3 times. I told her about posting the photos on Snapchat. I told her everything. Detective Ortiz listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she said, Okay, so you're saying Mark was abusive. Did you ever report this abuse to anyone? A teacher? A counselor? The police? I told her about Mrs. Patterson, the school counselor, and how my mom had shut it down. Did you have any injuries that were documented? Hospital visits? Doctor's appointments? I told her about the broken wrist. That was documented as an accident, correct? Yes. But it wasn't an accident. Mark did it. She made another note. Austin, I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to be honest with me. When you went into Mark's bedroom this morning, was he attacking you? Was he threatening you? Was there an immediate danger? I hesitated. No. He was asleep. Wanwa, man marsha trabenwire, bad d, rabin, wardy. So you shot a sleeping man? Yes. Oh. But he would have hurt me again. He would have hurt my brother and sister. I had to stop him. She wrote something down. Did you plan to kill Mark before this morning? I thought about it. But I didn't decide until today. Did you tell anyone you were thinking about it? I remembered the texts to Samantha. No, I should have lied. But I was too tired, too defeated. I texted my girlfriend. I told her I couldn't take it anymore. Detective Ortiz pulled out another document. A printout of my text conversation with Samantha. Someone had already seized her phone and extracted the messages. December 22nd. You texted Samantha Cruz. I can't take this anymore. Well, one day I'm just gonna snap. December 24th. You texted. Tomorrow is gonna be interesting. Watch the news. Lol. Can you explain these messages? I felt my stomach drop. Those texts made it sound like I'd been planning this for days. Like it was premeditated. Like it wasn't self-defense at all. I was just venting, I said weakly. I didn't mean I was going to kill him. I was just angry. Detective Ortiz leaned forward. Austin, I need you to understand something. You shot a sleeping man 3 times. You posted about it on social media. You told your girlfriend beforehand that something was going to happen. This doesn't look like self-defense. This looks like murder. Premeditated murder. Do you understand that? I did understand. I understood perfectly. I'd just confessed to first-degree murder. I'd given them motive, means, opportunity, and intent. I'd handed them the case on a silver platter, and there was nothing I could do to take it back. The interrogation continued for another hour. Detective Ortiz asked about the gun, how I'd accessed it, whether I'd practiced with it, whether I'd thought about using it before. She asked about my social media posts, why I'd posted them, what I was thinking, whether I understood they were evidence. She asked about my relationship with my mom, with Dylan and Emma, with Samantha. She asked if I had a history of violence, of mental illness, of drug use. She asked if I regretted what I'd done. I told her the truth. I didn't. I'd killed Mark to protect myself and my family, and I'd do it again if I had to. She wrote that down too. At 1:45 p.m., Detective Ortiz ended the interrogation. Okay, Austin. I think that's enough for now. You're going to be transferred to the Juvenile Detention Center, and you'll be arraigned on Monday. I strongly suggest you get a lawyer. Do you understand? I nodded. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure. What's going to happen to Dylan and Emma? Are they okay? Detective Ortiz's expression softened slightly. They're with Child Protective Services right now. They're being evaluated to make sure they're safe. Depending on what your mother decides, they'll either stay with her or be placed in foster care temporarily. And my mom, your mother is cooperating with the investigation. She's given a statement. That's all I can tell you. I was taken back to a holding cell. I sat on the metal bench, staring at the wall, replaying the interrogation in my head. I'd confessed. I'd told them everything. I'd given them every piece of evidence they needed to convict me. And the worst part was, I didn't even care. I was so exhausted, so done with everything, that going to prison felt almost like a relief. At least in prison, I wouldn't have to see Mark's face. At least in prison, I'd be free of him. But freedom, I was about to learn, was a lot more complicated than I'd thought. The digital evidence. While I sat in the Juvenile Detention Center on December 26th, the Cedar Rapids Police Department's digital forensics team was tearing apart my life. They'd seized my phone, my laptop, my iPad. They'd obtained warrants for my social media accounts, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, even my YouTube watch history. They pulled every text message, every photo, every search query. And what they found painted a picture of a teenager who'd been planning a murder for weeks, if not months. The search history on my laptop was damning. Starting in early December 2021, I'd Googled dozens of variations of the same question. Self-defense laws, Iowa.org. Battered person syndrome. How to prove abuse in court. But I'd also searched, how long does it take police to investigate a shooting? What happens if you kill someone in self-defense? Can you go to jail for killing an abuser? And most damningly, on December 15th, I'd searched, how to make someone's death look like an accident. I don't remember searching that. Maybe I was just curious. Maybe I was exploring all my options. But to a jury, it would look like premeditation. Then, there was my TikTok account. In the weeks before Christmas, I'd been watching true crime content obsessively. Videos about the Menendez brothers who killed their parents and claimed abuse. Videos about battered women who'd killed their husbands and been acquitted. Videos about prison life, about what happens when teenagers go to jail. The prosecution would later argue that I'd been researching how to get away with murder, using true crime videos as a blueprint. My lawyer would argue I was just a kid interested in true crime, like millions of other teenagers. But the timing was suspicious. Why was I suddenly so interested in cases about people killing their abusers in the weeks before I killed mine? The text messages were even worse. The conversation with Samantha that Detective Ortiz had shown me during the interrogation was just the tip of the iceberg. Forensic analysts recovered deleted messages going back months. On November 28th, 2 days after Mark lost his job, I texted Samantha. I hate him so much. I wish he would just die. On December 8th, if he hits me one more time, I swear I'm gonna lose it. On December 20th, I found my grandpa's gun. I know where it is. I could use it if I had to. Samantha had replied. Austin, please don't talk like that. You're scaring me. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. I'd replied. I won't. I promise. But I'd been lying. And then there were the Snapchat posts. The 3 posts I'd made on Christmas morning had been screenshotted by multiple people before I deleted them. And those screenshots were now evidence. But forensic analysts also recovered my Snapchat messages, private DMs I'd sent to friends in the days before the murder. On December 23rd, I'd sent a message to my friend Jacob. Yo, hypothetically, if someone was abusing you, and you defended yourself and they died, is that murder? Jacob had replied. IDK, man, probably depends on the situation. Why? I'd replied. Just curious. That message alone suggested I was thinking about killing Mark and trying to figure out if I could claim self-defense. The final piece of digital evidence was the most bizarre. My Venmo transactions. On December 29th. Wait, that's after Christmas. Let me correct that. The prosecution didn't find any Venmo transactions, but they did find my Amazon search history. On December 20th, I'd searched for gun cleaning kits and how to load a revolver. I'd never actually bought anything, but the searches were there, time-stamped, saved in the cloud. Evidence of planning. Evidence of intent. When my lawyer, Rebecca Vaughn, finally got access to all of this evidence in early January 2022, she called me at the detention center for an emergency meeting. She laid it all out for me. The search history, the TikTok videos, the text messages, the Snapchat posts. Austin, she said, her voice tight with frustration, this is bad, really bad. The prosecution is going to argue that you planned this for weeks. They're going to say you researched how to kill Mark. You told your girlfriend you were going to do it. You documented the crime in real time, and you showed zero remorse. They're going for first-degree murder. If you're convicted, you're looking at life in prison without parole. But it was self-defense, I protested. He was abusive. He would have killed me eventually. Rebecca shook her head. Austin, self-defense requires an immediate threat. Mark was asleep. He went to the garage, got the gun, walked upstairs, and shot him. That's not self-defense. That's premeditation. We can try to argue battered person syndrome, but it's going to be an uphill battle, especially with your mother testifying against you. That stopped me cold. Wait, what? My mom is testifying against me? Rebecca nodded. She's cooperating with the prosecution. She's given multiple statements saying the abuse allegations are false, that you're lying, that Mark never hurt you. She's claiming you resented his discipline and decided to kill him. Austin, your mother is going to be their star witness. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My own mother, the woman who'd stood by and watched Mark choke me, who'd made excuses for every bruise and broken bone, was going to stand up in court and call me a liar. She was going to help the prosecution send me to prison for life. I'd killed Mark to protect her, to protect Dylan and Emma, to stop the cycle of abuse. And she was going to betray me. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would she do that? Rebecca sighed. Honestly, I think she's in denial. I think she can't face the reality that she married an abuser and let it happen for 3 years. It's easier for her to believe you're a troubled teen who murdered her husband than to admit she failed to protect her own children. And the prosecution is taking advantage of that. They're painting you as a cold-blooded killer, and she's helping them do it. That night, lying on my bunk in the detention center, I realized I was completely alone. My mom had abandoned me. My stepfather was dead. My siblings were in foster care. My girlfriend was being questioned by police. And every piece of digital evidence I'd created, every text, every search, every post, was being used to destroy me. I thought I was documenting my freedom. Instead, I documented my own conviction. The media storm. If you Googled my name in January 2022, you'd find over 2 million results. Austin Bradley Christmas murder. Cedar Rapids teen kills stepfather. Country war. Snapchat killer posts crime online. I had become a viral sensation, a cautionary tale, a meme. The story had everything. A Christmas morning murder, a teenage killer, and social media evidence. It was perfect for the 24-hour news cycle. And the media devoured it. CNN ran a segment titled, "The Snapchat Killer," when social media becomes evidence. They interviewed digital forensics experts who explained how my posts had given police a timestamped, geotagged confession. Fox News ran a segment called "Troubled Teen or Cold-Blooded Killer," where pundits debated whether I deserved sympathy or the death penalty. Iowa doesn't have the death penalty, but that didn't stop them from discussing it. MSNBC interviewed a psychiatrist who'd never met me, but confidently diagnosed me with antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic tendencies based on my Snapchat posts. Local news was even worse. The Cedar Rapids Gazette ran my school photo on the front page, with the headline "Teen Arrested in Christmas Morning Murder." They interviewed neighbors who said they'd always thought something was off about that family. They interviewed my former teachers, who described me as quiet and kept to himself, code words that made me sound like a school shooter. They interviewed Samantha's parents, who said they'd forbidden their daughter from seeing that boy, but she'd snuck around behind their backs. Every article, every segment, every interview painted me as a monster. Social media was even more brutal. Someone created a TikTok account dedicated to exposing me, posting screenshots of my old Instagram photos, my tweets, my Spotify playlists, anything they could find to prove I was disturbed. People made reaction videos to my Snapchat posts, acting horrified and outraged. How could he post this? What kind of psycho does this? He deserves to rot in prison. The comment sections were filled with people calling for my death, saying I should be tried as an adult, saying I was evil and beyond redemption. But there was also, surprisingly, a small subset of people who defended me. On Reddit, a thread in R True Crime titled "The Austin Bradley Case, Self-Defense or Murder," attracted thousands of comments debating whether I'd had a right to kill Mark. Some people argued I was a victim of abuse who'd finally fought back. Others argued that killing a sleeping man could never be justified. The thread was locked after 3 days due to excessive arguing and personal attacks, but it had generated over 15,000 comments. A few TikTokers made videos defending me, arguing that the media was ignoring the abuse allegations and focusing only on the sensational aspects of the case. One video, posted by a creator named Justice for Austin, got over 1 million views. She said, "Y'all are so quick to call this kid a monster, but where was this energy when he was being abused for 3 years? Where were the teachers, the counselors, the neighbors who always thought something was off? Why did no one help him until it was too late?" Her comment section was split between people thanking her for speaking truth and people accusing her of glorifying murder. On January 15, 2022, a GoFundMe was started by Mark's sister titled "Justice for Mark Dawson." The description read, "Dead. Mark was a loving husband and stepfather who was brutally murdered on Christmas morning by a troubled teenager. We're raising money to cover funeral costs and legal fees as we seek justice for Mark." The campaign raised over $50,000 in 2 weeks. Every dollar felt like another nail in my coffin, proof that the world saw Mark as the victim and me as the villain. But then, on January 22nd, something unexpected happened. A GoFundMe was started by a woman I'd never met, titled Legal Defense Fund for Austin Bradley. The description read, Austin is a 16-year-old boy who endured years of abuse before defending himself. He deserves a fair trial and a competent defense. All funds will go directly to his legal team. I didn't know who started it. Rebecca thought it might have been Samantha's older sister, who'd been vocal about supporting me. But it raised $12,000 in the first week. It wasn't nearly enough to cover my legal costs, but it was something. It was proof that not everyone thought I was a monster. The media attention intensified as my arraignment approached. On January 24, 2022, I was formally charged with first-degree murder and arraigned in juvenile court. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Klein, asked if I understood the charges. I said yes. She asked how I pled. My lawyer had advised me to plead not guilty so we could argue self-defense. I said not guilty. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Outside, protesters held signs, "Justice for Mark" and "Lock him up." But there were also a handful of counter-protesters holding signs that read, "Abuse victims, fight back, and free Austin." The judge set a trial date for June 2022 and denied bail, citing me as a flight risk and a danger to the community. I was sent back to the juvenile detention center, where I'd spend the next 5 months waiting for a trial that would determine whether I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. The trial of Austin Bradley. Jury selection and opening statements. The trial of Austin Bradley began on June 6, 2022, in the Lynn County Courthouse in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was 17 years old by then. I'd had my birthday in March, alone in a detention cell. The trial had been moved to adult court because the prosecution had successfully argued that the severity of my crime warranted adult charges. If convicted, I'd face the same sentence as an adult. Life in prison without parole. Jury selection took 4 days. My lawyer, Rebecca Vaughn, and the prosecutor, District Attorney Marcus Chen, questioned over 100 potential jurors. The challenge was finding 12 people who hadn't already made up their minds. Everyone had seen the Snapchat post. Everyone had heard about the case. Rebecca used her challenges to strike anyone who seemed too sympathetic to law enforcement or too judgmental about teenagers. Marcus struck anyone who seemed too sympathetic to abuse victims or too skeptical of the police. Eventually, they seated a jury. 8 women, 4 men, ranging in age from 22 to 68. They included a high school teacher, a retired construction worker, a nurse, a software engineer, and a stay-at-home mom, Dottie. These 12 strangers would decide my fate. Opening statements began on the morning of June 10. The courtroom was packed, every seat in the gallery filled with journalists, family members, and curious onlookers. I sat at the defense table, wearing a suit Rebecca had bought for me, trying to look calm and composed, even though my heart was racing. My mom sat in the front row behind the prosecution, refusing to look at me. Dylan and Emma weren't there. Rebecca had successfully argued they shouldn't be forced to testify or attend, given their age. District Attorney Marcus Chen stood and approached the jury. He was in his 50s, Asian American, with short graying hair and rimless glasses. He spoke in a calm, measured tone that made everything he said sound reasonable and factual. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a cold-blooded murder committed on Christmas morning by a teenager who thought he was above the law. On December 25, 2021, Austin Bradley woke up, retrieved a loaded revolver from his garage, walked into his stepfather's bedroom, and shot him 3 times while he slept. Then he took photos of the body, posted them on social media, and waited for police to arrive. This was not self-defense. This was not a heat-of-the-moment act. This was premeditated, calculated murder. Chen walked over to a table where the prosecution's evidence was displayed. He picked up a poster-sized printout of my Snapchat post, the one showing Mark's body. This is the photo Austin posted minutes after killing his stepfather. The caption reads, "I did what needed to be done. Merry Christmas." Does this sound like someone in fear for their life? Does this sound like someone who acted in self-defense? Or does this sound like someone who's proud of what they did? He put down the poster and pulled up a timeline on a screen. The evidence will show that Austin planned this murder for weeks. He searched online for information about self-defense laws and how police investigate shootings. He told his girlfriend he was going to snap. He texted her the day before the murder, saying tomorrow is going to be interesting. Watch the news. He retrieved the murder weapon days before he used it. And then, on Christmas morning, he executed his plan. He shot Mark Dawson, a man who was asleep, unarmed, and posed no immediate threat, and documented the crime on social media. This is first-degree murder, and the evidence will prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. Chen sat down. Then, it was Rebecca's turn. She stood slowly, smoothed her blazer, and walked toward the jury. Rebecca was in her early 40s, white, with shoulder-length blonde hair, and a calm, empathetic demeanor. She told me her strategy was to humanize me, to make the jury see me as a victim, not a monster. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about survival. Austin Bradley is not a cold-blooded killer. He's a 16-year-old boy who endured 3 years of physical and psychological abuse at the hands of his stepfather, Mark Dawson. He lived in a house where violence was routine, where his safety was never guaranteed, where he went to bed every night not knowing if he'd wake up to another beating. And on Christmas morning, he made a choice. He chose to survive. Rebecca pulled up a photo of my broken wrist, X-rays from the hospital visit in 2019. This is Austin's wrist, broken by Mark Dawson during an argument. The hospital documented it as an accident, but it wasn't. Mark grabbed Austin's arm and twisted until the bone snapped. This is just one injury we can prove. There were dozens of others, bruises, cuts, a concussion mark, caused by shoving Austin into a wall. Austin tried to get help. He told a school counselor. But his mother, Jennifer Bradley, shut it down. She chose her husband over her son. And so Austin was trapped. She walked closer to the jury. The prosecution wants you to believe Austin is a monster because he posted photos on Snapchat. But those posts don't prove premeditation. They prove trauma. They prove a child who'd been living in survival mode for so long that he didn't know how to process what he'd just done. Yes, Austin killed Mark Dawson. We're not denying that. But he killed him to protect himself, to protect his younger siblings, to stop the abuse. This is a case of self-defense, and we will prove it. Thank you. The opening statement set the tone for the entire trial. The prosecution would paint me as a calculated killer. The defense would paint me as a desperate victim. And the jury would have to decide which story they believe. The prosecution's case. The prosecution's case lasted 2 weeks. Marcus Chen called 32 witnesses and introduced over 200 pieces of evidence. His strategy was simple. Prove that I'd planned the murder. Prove that Mark wasn't an immediate threat. And prove that my Snapchat posts showed a lack of remorse. If he could establish those 3 things, the jury would convict me of first-degree murder. The first witness was Officer Michael Torres, one of the first responders to the scene on Christmas morning. He testified about finding me on the porch, calm and cooperative, waiting to be arrested. When I arrived, Austin was sitting on the front steps, smoking a cigarette. He stood up when he saw us, raised his hands and said, "The gun's on the porch. I'm not armed. He's inside. He's dead." He wasn't crying. He wasn't panicking. He was eerily calm. The prosecution used this testimony to argue I wasn't acting like someone who'd just defended themselves in a life-or-death situation. I was acting like someone who'd completed a task and was ready to move on. Next came Detective Sarah Ortiz, who testified about my confession. She played the recording of our interrogation, and the jury listened to my voice explaining in detail how I'd shot Mark. The most damaging part was when I admitted Mark had been asleep and posed no immediate threat. "He wasn't attacking you?" No, he was asleep. So there was no immediate danger? Not at that moment, but there would have been later. That exchange killed any hope of a pure self-defense argument. You can't claim self-defense if the person you killed was unconscious. The prosecution then called a series of forensic experts. A ballistics expert testified that the 3 shots had been fired from close range, consistent with me standing over Mark's bed. A medical examiner testified that Mark had died from the gunshot wound to the head, and that the other 2 shots would have been survivable if he'd received immediate medical attention, implying I'd wanted to make sure he was dead. A crime scene investigator testified about the lack of defensive wounds on Mark's body, proving he hadn't fought back because he'd been asleep. But the most devastating testimony came from the digital forensics expert, Dr. Alan Moss. He walked the jury through my entire digital footprint. My Google search history, my TikTok watch history, my text messages, my Snapchat posts. He displayed everything on a large screen so the jury could see it all. The searches for how to make someone's death look like an accident. The text to Samantha saying, "I'm gonna snap." The TikTok videos about teenagers who'd killed their parents. And most damningly, the Snapchat posts. Dr. Moss explained that I'd posted the photos at 7:52 a.m., just 5 minutes after the shooting, and that the posts had remained public for 47 minutes before I deleted them. This suggests the defendant was not in shock or panic, Dr. Moss testified. He was calm enough to document the crime, write captions, and share them with over 200 people. That level of functioning suggests premeditation and a lack of remorse. The prosecution's final witness was my mother, Jennifer Bradley. This was the moment I'd been dreading since Rebecca had told me she was testifying against me. My mom took the stand wearing a black dress, her hair neatly styled, her makeup perfect. She looked like a grieving widow, which is exactly the image the prosecution wanted. Da Chen asked her to describe Mark. She said he was a wonderful man, a devoted husband, a loving stepfather who tried so hard to give us a good life. She described him as strict but fair, someone who'd set boundaries because he cared about us. She denied every allegation of abuse. "Mark never hit Austin," she said. Never. Never. Austin resented Mark's discipline and made up these stories to justify what he did. Rebecca cross-examined her, asking about the broken wrist, the bruises, the time Mark had choked me. My mom had an answer for everything. The broken wrist was from a bike accident. The bruises were from Austin playing rough with friends. The choking incident never happened. "Austin is lying," she said, looking directly at the jury. "He's a troubled boy who killed my husband in cold blood." I sat there, listening to my own mother call me a liar, and I realized she genuinely believed it. She'd convinced herself that Mark was innocent and I was the villain because it was the only way she could live with herself. The prosecution rested its case on June 22nd. They built a strong, evidence-based argument that I was a cold-blooded killer who'd planned the murder and shown no remorse. Now it was Rebecca's turn to try to save me. The defense's case. The defense's case was much shorter, only 1 week. Rebecca called 10 witnesses, all focused on proving one thing. Mark Dawson was an abusive man, and I had killed him to survive. The first witness was Dr. Linda Marshall, a psychologist who specialized in battered person syndrome. She'd evaluated me for 3 hours in May and concluded that I exhibited all the classic signs of a long-term abuse victim: hypervigilance, emotional numbness, difficulty trusting authority figures, and a persistent belief that I was in constant danger. Austin didn't kill Mark out of anger or revenge, Dr. Marshall testified. He killed him because he genuinely believed it was the only way to stop the abuse. That's consistent with battered person syndrome, where the victim feels so trapped and powerless that violence becomes the only perceived option. Rebecca called my younger brother Dylan, who was 13. He testified, reluctantly, about witnessing Mark hit me multiple times. "I saw him slap Austin once for talking back," Dylan said quietly. "And I saw him push Austin down the stairs one time when they were arguing." The prosecution tried to discredit him on cross-examination, suggesting he was lying to protect me, but Dylan held firm. He was scared, but he was telling the truth. Rebecca called two of my former teachers, who testified that I'd always been a good kid, never violent, never disruptive. She called Samantha, my girlfriend, who testified about the texts I'd sent her describing the abuse. He told me he was scared all the time, Samantha said, tears streaming down her face. He said he didn't know how much longer he could take it. I tried to help him, but I didn't know what to do. I wish I'd done more. The prosecution pointed out that Samantha had never reported the abuse to authorities, suggesting she hadn't taken my claims seriously. But the most important witness was me. Rebecca put me on the stand, knowing it was a huge risk. If I came across as cold or arrogant, the jury would hate me. But if I came across as sincere and remorseful, it might save my life. I took the stand on June 28th, the courtroom silent as I was sworn in. Rebecca asked me to tell my story, and I did. I described every beating, every insult, every threat. I described the fear that consumed my life. I described waking up on Christmas morning and making the decision. And I described the moment I pulled the trigger. I didn't want to kill him, I said, my voice shaking. But I didn't see any other way out. I thought if I didn't stop him, he'd kill me. Or he'd kill Dylan or Emma. I couldn't let that happen. Da-Chen cross-examined me for 2 hours. He hammered me on the fact that Mark had been asleep, that there was no immediate threat, that I'd had other options. You could have called the police, couldn't you? I tried. They didn't help. You could have run away. I couldn't leave Dylan and Emma. You could have told a teacher, a counselor, a neighbor. I did tell a counselor. She didn't believe me. Chen then asked about the Snapchat posts. Why did you post those photos, Austin? I didn't have a good answer. I don't know. No, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was in shock. You were in shock, but you were calm enough to write captions and take selfies? I didn't respond. Chen sat down, confident he'd destroyed my credibility. The defense rested on June 30th. Closing arguments were scheduled for July 1st. Everything came down to one question. Would the jury believe I was a victim, or would they believe I was a killer? The verdict. Closing arguments on July 1st were a battle of narratives. Da-Chen argued I was a calculating killer who'd planned a murder and documented it for attention. Rebecca argued I was a desperate abuse victim who'd fought back in the only way he knew how. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. At 7:30 p.m., they sent a note to the judge. They'd reached a verdict. The courtroom was reconvened. I sat at the defense table, my hands shaking, as the jury filed in. The judge asked the foreperson if they'd reached a verdict. We have, Your Honor. What say you? The foreperson stood. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant not guilty. I exhaled, a wave of relief washing over me. But the foreperson wasn't done. On the lesser charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. My heart sank. Guilty. I'd been convicted, not of premeditated murder, but of reckless murder. The jury had believed some of my abuse claims, but didn't think killing a sleeping man was justified. On July 15th, I was sentenced to 35 years to life. I'm currently serving that sentence at Iowa State Penitentiary. I'll be eligible for parole in 2056, when I'm 51 years old. This is the Christmas Day Confession.